Hello and welcome to the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. This is your regular update for all your tillage news and advice. The Irish landscape is dominated by grassland, and it's no surprise a high proportion of the conversation about farming is based around a grazing animal. From a media point of view, other farming enterprises continue outside the limelight, only to hit the headlines when some sort of a problem occurs in an industry. As an example, the outbreak of bird flu in flocks of turkeys is a recent example. The tillage industry occupies about 8% of the land area, and according to National Farm Survey, specialist tillage farms are the most profitable enterprise after specialist dairying. The tillage industry is attractive to become involved in, whether you're just starting out in college or maybe you're already in the industry. There's certainly plenty of opportunities there for you to exploit. There are many career opportunities in the industry which can be attractive not only in salaries but also a satisfying work environment. To chat about this, I'm joined by Barry Larkin, the CEO of Acorn Group, to chat about some of these opportunities that exist for people in the industry. Barry, can I first you might tell us a little bit about your journey before you ended up being the CEO of the Acorn Group?
Would have grown up on a farm. I'm from just between Burr and Rossgrey, a place called Coolderry. I would have always had a very strong affiliation with farming, and come time doing my leaving cert, I had decided that I wanted to do ag science in UCD. I specialised in animal and crop production. And I probably gravitated towards the crop side of things in the final years, maybe year 3 and 4, the electives and whatever. And I would have done a master's degree with Dr. Tom McCabe in UCD. I was specialised in fungicides in winter wheat. And I worked with Tom McCabe then for maybe a year throughout my master's and all of the 2013 season. On research and development trials, evaluating fungicides and varieties and herbicides and whatnot. So a huge learning experience. And then I decided to move to Australia. It was more of a holiday, more is what I had in mind. And I drove a combine for a while and done a bit of traveling. And I got a permanent job there in agronomy, again in research and development with Teagasc Australia, a nationwide company in Australia. Again, evaluating fungicides and herbicides and crop varieties.
That must have been a very different experience, Barry, in terms of an Irish type scenario in comparison to an Australian type scenario, was it?
Hugely different, but I suppose I wasn't too long out of college. I didn't get into the big bad world of commercialization, and research and development trials are pretty much the same all over the place. One thing that struck me in Australia was that they still use a lot of products, a lot of chemicals that we banned here. I remember the first time I went spraying Roundup Ready canola trial, and I did second guess myself, and I was throwing in a whole load of glyphosate into the spray tank to make sure all the weeds were killed, but pray to God that the canola didn't die, and it didn't. It was great. It was amazing to see. But it was hugely different, I suppose, in terms of scale, in terms of seeding rates, in terms of yields and chemical rates. So yeah, hugely different. But I suppose the fundamentals are the same, and agronomy principles are the same. Put the seed in the ground, let it germinate, look after it when it comes above the ground, and fertilize it accordingly.
So the skills you learned in UCD were pretty transferable enough, really. A lot of
absolutely. Like, you spend 3 or 4 years in college, and it's great. It focuses the mind, but it's not really till you get out into the field and start doing things that you really start learning what's going on.
So then you finished up in Australia, obviously at some stage, and you came back to Ireland, or did you go somewhere else in between?
Done about 3 years in Australia, 3 full seasons. So I had I suppose I had a fairly well mastered at that stage, and it was decision time whether you stay there or whether you come home. And I had decided, I was with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and we had decided that it was probably time to come home. Now we had no major plan when we came home. I was just get a job and see what happened. And at the time, CropLink had been purchased by Gold Crop. So CropLink was the chemical company, a wholesale chemical company, and purchased by Gold Crop, and they were looking to take on someone. So I came home in December 16, and I started with CropLink in January 17. So that entailed very much a different role, but the knowledge of everything I had learned in the previous 4 or 5 or 6 years was of huge benefit. I was essentially a commercial role, but a lot of technical involvement in terms of what a chemical can and can't do. So I worked with CropLink for about 4 years.
And your interaction in that was it kind of business to business, or was it kind of business to
business?
farmer as
No,
well?
it was business to business. So I suppose I would have had a lot of interface with merchants and co-ops around the country. But again, huge amount of importance was to deal with the actual agronomists who were dealing with the farmers, helping them along. I suppose number one, keeping the price right and keeping the products relevant, but also giving a lot of technical advice where required. Worked with them for 4 years, finished up in December 2020, and I started in January 2021 with the Acorn Group. So the Acorn Group is just made up of about 10 fairly sizable merchants all around the country, for all down from the southeast down to Munster and all the way up to Donegal. So they're well scattered, but fairly relevant in terms of the agri and the arable sector.
Okay, and that was obviously, it's a very different role. Then you're now CEO of that. What does that entail?
Hugely different. And look, the CEO is I suppose I'd almost describe it as a flattering title, but the Acorn Group is made up of merchants, of members, and there's only one of me in Acorn, and I coordinate the group. Probably a better term to be used, but essentially a lot of it involves purchasing and purchasing of products, chemicals, and crop packaging and stuff like that, and also interaction and interface in terms of what legislation is coming down the line, and what, I suppose, what spin or influence that you can have in that, so it's more favourable to the Irish farmer in general, really.
Trying to see what's coming around the corner a little bit as well, I suppose.
Well, that's try and get the inside line somewhere, yeah.
Sure. So if you were to look back then, Barry, as regards your education, I suppose, look, when you're maybe coming out of the first year or two in college and you're trying to decide a little bit about what specialism you're going to take, or even having a look maybe at the UCD kind of crops and animal course, do you think, looking back, it was flexible enough, or maybe even specialized enough? Or do you think, I suppose, in a general sense, that did it put you at any great disadvantage if you would have decided, no, maybe crops isn't for me, I might go down a different route?
Yeah, I suppose farming at home, we're beef and tillage. So I would have had a flair for both of those. Never terribly interested in the dairy side of things. But when it come to either livestock production or livestock produce versus arable, I suppose it was always back in the back of my mind that I could go either way. But what really got me thinking about the arable side of things was I had this I went to Australia as part of my work experience in third year. And I've been to Australia a couple of times before that. And what struck me was, if you want to go and travel the world, no matter where you go, if you have agronomy skills or you know how to grow crops, well, essentially it's the plants or the wheat and the rice and the corn of this world that feeds the world. If you want to go and milk cows in Europe, well, you're probably looking for a job in maybe Ireland, Western UK, or Northwestern France, and you're pretty limited after that. But in terms of arable production, you get a job in South America, Central America, United States, Canada, Australia, Russia, if you really wanted to go there, or any of those places. So it was hugely relevant for, I suppose, maybe the ambitions I had. And obviously you go down different roads and you take different turns, and I end up where I am today, but still hugely relevant towards the crop sector.
And I suppose we do often miss that in terms of the conversation here in Ireland. It's, we're very much dominated by grassland and therefore dominated by livestock conversation, if you like. Whereas if you go to most of the rest of the world, it's probably almost a diametric opposite. The crops are very much more so the bigger agricultural output of most countries.
Hugely so, and even like it's if you look across the world, it's wheat and oilseed rape, or canola. They're the two big crops that are grown in much of, say, outback Australia, or in terms of rotation in the United States. They're the ones that are grown most. Here, while we do talk about livestock a lot, we actually have a huge population of livestock that needs to be fed, and we're in a deficit at the moment. And I think there's probably a little bit more of a swing or a bit more of a push towards arable area increase to fulfill or to maybe weaken our dependency on imports, and to feed that population. And rightly so, because the arable sector in Ireland, in terms of the way we produce food, while we produce food efficiently in all sectors we're in, the arable sector has a huge benefit in terms of the environment and the emissions produced in terms of amount of food produced per acre. So hugely beneficial. And sustainability, I think, is only a matter of time before it comes into it all, and that there will be an onus or a requirement on farmers or feed blenders or end users to use more of the native materials available to get the end produce.
And if you go back, you've done a little bit of travel around the world, you've got a fairly decent insight into the Irish tillage industry. Starting back from it, how would you rate, or how would your assessment, or what would your assessment be of the industry here in Ireland in comparison to some of the rest of the world, in terms of our ability to take on new technologies, or be up to date with the latest kind of things?
I suppose we're just such an old country with round fields and small fields. So when I was in Australia, I would have used a lot of GPS technology, big machines and stuff like that. So we're probably that little bit behind the curve in terms of taking that on. There are some sizable farmers in Ireland who absolutely embrace that, and I think are absolutely seeing the benefits of it as well. But we are probably at a bit of a disadvantage in that the arable area in Ireland is very localized in the northeast, the southeast, pockets of the Midlands, and then South Tipperary, North Cork, that general area. And if it was a bigger area, if it was twice the size it is today, well, then I think there'd be more emphasis put on all of those things. But we would be behind the curve a bit, all right. Like, in terms of the crops that we grow here, it's just a pity we don't have a milling facility where we have a very vibrant drinks industry, which is hugely beneficial and hugely important to the arable sector. But one thing we can't get away from is we have a huge beef and dairy sector. And I'll go back to it. They need to be fed with grains, and we can probably increase our native grains to fulfill that gap.
So there's plenty of opportunity out there. When you're looking at the ag merchant business, and obviously that's kind of where you're very much based at the moment, what sort of opportunities do you think are out there for maybe somebody who was either maybe doing their Leaving Cert this year and thinking of going into college, or maybe some early starters in college, or maybe even people who might be in the industry as it exists? What sort of opportunities do you think are out there for people to develop within the tillage sector?
I suppose the simple answer is there's lots of opportunities. If I had 5 good candidates come to me today, I'd be confident I'd get each of them a job. Put it that way. There is a shortage of agronomists out there. And there are some Acorn members, but there are equally many other merchants outside of Acorn involved in the arable area, or in the arable sector, that require agronomists or people to walk crops or to get into that game. And I think there has been a major slowdown, probably in around the time or a year or two after me, when I left college, that there has been fewer and fewer people coming into the arable sector, and more people going into the dairy sector. While if you look at the numbers going in and out of UCD and look at WIT with the increase in their level 8 offering, there's probably more people going into the agricultural sector, but less and less people going into the arable sector.
Sure.
So I think there's huge opportunity in the arable sector. There's plenty of jobs available. It's a wonderfully flexible job role to be an agronomist. And it's, yes, you're quite busy for certain periods of the year, but let's face it, you won't be doing a whole pile when the crop is being harvested, or when there's nothing going on at all. There's work to be done, and you have to learn the business that you're in and what's expected of you. But there are quiet times as well as busy times, and it's quite a flexible environment to be in, rather than being tied to milking cows all day every day.
I suppose even go back to my own career. Back in the day, I was involved in a little bit of that, crop walking and in a small merchant, and I'd say half my time ended up be talking about cattle and cows anyway, even though I was very much employed as an agronomist, because that's what pays the way for the rest of the year. So, like it or not, even if you're really into crops as I am, you probably still end up doing a little bit of the ruminant business as well.
Yeah, I suppose, like I was saying to you, there's a huge amount of people that come out of the ag colleges in the last couple of years, and they're relatively, they're beyond the younger side, and the age profile in the dairy sector, or in the livestock sector in general, is probably an awful lot lower than it would be in the arable sector, and that's probably because they've been quite attractive. There's more onus and more emphasis by maybe government policy and all that kind of stuff put onto the livestock produce. But I think we should see a swing back towards the arable sector. And I would encourage anybody that is thinking of a career in the arable sector that I would pursue it. It's very interesting, and there's lots of very good people in there too. But there's lots of opportunity. Just going back to probably the age profile of a lot of the businesses, there's a huge amount of opportunity to carve out a successful career.
I was going to ask you that. Do you expect I suppose a changeover, maybe we'll put it like that, in terms of the industry personnel over the next number of years?
Yeah, I suppose there has been a changing of the guard ongoing for a while, and it's happening slowly but surely. But given there's quite a few people that I would be dealing with, and that I would have dealt with when I came home from Australia. And let's face it, there's many of them would be older than me. They would have worked hard all their career, and I'd say some of them are probably looking forward to a retirement. But one thing that would make them a lot happier would be if they had a couple of vibrant young people coming along behind them, and they are scarce at the moment.
Well, look, they can't keep going forever, I suppose, on the other side of it. So there's also going to be
well, some of them think they can.
Well, I'm sure. Maybe we'll all be there eventually, I suppose.
Their families might say otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned you were looking at, I suppose, some of the new regulations, and you're keeping an eye on kind of what's coming down the track as well. Do you think that some of those new, I suppose, regulations, whether they're around nitrates or whether they're around pesticides, do you think that'll necessitate even more work for advisors out there, and maybe even be a bit more attractive to attracting more people into the tillage industry?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the current SUR, probably that's to be implemented in the next couple of years in its current form, it would suggest that we're going to require a whole army of new people to continue to do what we do in the way that we do it. Now, I suppose it could very well be interpreted in time in a different way, but in its current form, we would require a huge amount of new independent agronomy advisors, where they are very few and far between. I suppose even looking at Teagasc, the emphasis would probably be a bit more on the livestock sector, where they would have many more planners or experts in the livestock sector than there would be in the arable sector. And if this new regulation comes in its current form, I think there would be a huge shortfall there, especially in the short term. But there's, going back to the emissions and how carbon efficient the arable sector is, I think joining both the new regulation together and how important the carbon footprint of the arable sector is, I think there'll be huge opportunity for any new entrants or any new agronomists looking for a career in the Irish agri sector, or in the Irish arable sector. But also, if people had it in their mind that they wanted to go traveling, like in my own experience, if they wanted to go to Australia or America or wherever, they can gain valuable experience in those countries and then come home and just resume the agronomy experience here. So I do foresee a reasonable draw for younger people into the arable sector if everything is to come to pass.
Okay, so if you were, and the final question I'm going to ask you, Barry, if you were to maybe have a bit of advice for, say, the first year college graduates who started off in UCD or maybe some of the other colleges around the country, who might be thinking about the crop, maybe a career in crops, what would that advice be?
I'd say go for it. go for it with both hands. I can only speak from my own experience and the people that I know. Like, I mean, I would have went to college with plenty of other guys who went down dairy and route and went down beef routes and whatever. And while, look, they're all very happy and very successful in their own right. But I also went to college with plenty of guys who done crop agronomy, crop science, and it tends to be a smaller industry. You tend to get to know them and be friendly with them and get on with them over the coming years. I think the idea of being able to travel and use your agronomy in no matter what country you are in the world, I think a first year ag science student probably should be keeping an open mind as to what route they're going to go down. I believe there's a new agronomy or a crop specific course available in UCD. I'm not sure whether it's this year or in the coming years, but I think that's a major benefit to the industry. Well, I definitely keep an open mind, and if you're thinking of going down the agronomy route, well, I definitely stay on that track. I see a great future. Just think of when you're in college, you'll be thinking of lots of things, but you'll also be thinking of the social life, and think of all the Irish whiskies on the go and all the Irish beers. Sure, like, I mean, we've only got going on that in the last number of years. I think there's huge market potential there going forward.
There's only one small criticism, Barry, now of what you're after saying there. You should have said that at the very start of the podcast and people might have stuck with us. You're saying it at the very end.
Stick it in at the start. So,
but anyway, if ever there's a ringing endorsement of people trying to get in or people getting into the tillage sector, I think, Barry, in fairness, you've done a great job on it. Thanks very much for your time, Barry. I hope that you might join us again on the podcast in the future.
No worries at all. Great, Michael. Thanks a million.
So that's it for this week, and my thanks to Barry for joining me on the podcast. So finally, don't forget, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review, and follow on Apple Podcast or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.